And hand out, why don't you read the picture? Here it is. This one here. No. No. You should be you should be right there. I mean, Thomas always sits there. He's always in the picture. Yeah, I mean, we always have this whole side is lined up when we have a Zoom meeting with the executive committee, so that shouldn't be a problem. Okay. 33 participants already. Two participants already. In Searby.
Welcome back home.
Yeah. That's the first chat. Now, are you going to respond to him?
All right.
On my behalf?
No, other probably. He's responding. I don't want to, otherwise it messes up your flow.
You won't mess up anything.
Everyone.
It's a no, I'm not able to see anybody. It's Thomas Borghese asking that. Nelson?
Yep, I'm here.
Yeah, I can't see anybody.
Hey, Bernie.
It's
No, I don't see anyone. We see 40.
Wait, so I'm sorry, I can't, I'm sorry, say it again.
It's way too many people. You really wouldn't be able to see anyone.
Oh, I'm not gonna be able
When
to
it
see.
comes to webinar,
That's,
Nelson
Nelson is on the line right now.
That's how the webinar works.
Oh, wow. Are they gonna,
Too many.
are they,
No, I don't see anyone.
Oh,
Other than Nelson is saying that there's 55 participants, but I
my
don't see
question,
any.
Nelson, is are they going to be able to see me?
Everybody can see you.
All right.
Oh, everyone can see me, right?
Everybody can see you and everybody can see you.
Okay, and everyone can see Enda?
Can you see us, Bernie?
The chat, like they're saying, hi, how
And
are
could you hear us?
As normal as any other conversation.
Bernie's on the phone. She can see and hear us. Okay.
All right, thank you, Nelson. So I can start now, I can.
People see everything because of the way the webinar works. It's designed mainly for them to pay attention to you. You're like a teacher, basically.
All right.
And where all eyes forward, you know?
Okay, so basically I can now start to welcome everybody.
Absolutely, absolutely. They can hear you.
Okay, they hear me speaking to you? Good,
Yes, that's it.
thank you.
All right.
Okay. All right, so are you gonna remove the chat there? Greetings, I'd like to welcome everyone to this special webinar. This is now the third that we actually are having here from the boardroom of the Catholic Near East and Welfare Association and Pontifical Mission headquarters in New York City. I thank everyone for being here. As we've done in the past meetings, of course, we'd like to begin in prayer. And in a very special way, as the church prepares this coming Friday to celebrate the feast of Our Lady of Fatima, we implore the intercession of Our Lady of Fatima as we seek peace. peace in the lands where Kanewa serves, that is 15 countries, peace within our own republic, and peace in the hearts of each one of us. And so permit me just to begin by reading this prayer, asking for the intercession of Our Lady of Fatima. Mother of us all, you know all our sufferings and our hopes. In your motherly heart, you feel all the struggles between good and evil, between light and darkness that convulse the world. Accept the plea which we make in the Holy Spirit directly to your heart, and embrace with the love of the mother and handmaid of the Lord those who most await this embrace. Those whose act of entrustment to you also await to be embraced by your maternal heart. Take under your motherly protection the whole human family, which with affectionate love we entrust to you, O Virgin Mother. May there dawn for everyone a time of peace and freedom, a time of truth, of justice, and of hope. Amen. Again, I thank you. I thank each one of you for taking the time to be with us tonight. In a very special way, I want to offer thanks to the Kanewa staff, the members of the executive committee who have been involved in the production of these evenings that we have gathered here together, beginning with my executive assistant, Bernadette Wallace, with Michael Lasavita, our director of communications, with Trisul Singh Conway, our CFO, with Thomas Varghese, our director of programs, with Rafael Lafun, our director of IT, Jose Intriago, our director of human resources, Noel Saligsi, our director of development, Tim McCarthy, our director of creative services. Assisting me immediately tonight, you can see on, I guess, as you're looking at me on the screen, to my left, you are seeing Hemdat Saw, and also, as was involved in the other earlier meetings, the presence of Nelson Salcido of our IT staff. So to our executive committee, to the entire staff, I thank them. Most importantly, I thank each one of you for being present at this meeting. I said that I would begin a series of meetings, and we're going to try to do this monthly, whereby I would be reporting to you as the president of Catholic Near East and Pontifical Mission. I feel it is my responsibility to report to you on the activity of our organization, of this papal agency. So we're going to begin, as we begin to turn over and look at, you'll be looking at slides now, with just a general overview of the mission of Catholic Near East and Pontifical Mission, and then specifically what has been our response in Ukraine, and in particular our response in Ukraine in light of the trip that came under the guidance of His Eminence Cardinal Dolan, who is the president of the Board of Trustees, but it was a Kanewa organized trip that also invited other charitable agencies to be involved. And Cardinal Dolan made a point, as you'll see as we go through the slides, of reaching out to where those other agencies were working, in some cases working with us, in all cases certainly working in behalf of the suffering of the Ukrainian people. So let's begin by just an overview of Kanewa's work. And if there are questions, when I finish the overview, I'll invite you to make comments and questions. You can certainly submit those into the chat room. And then we'll pause for a moment and move into specifically our response to the war in Ukraine. Imdat? Nelson?
Yes, sir.
All right, so if you could put the slide, start the slides.
Sure.
Thank you. Okay, you can move to the second slide. This first slide that everyone is looking at identifies Kanewa as a papal agency. We're a papal agency formed in 1926 by Pope Pius XI. It is an agency, as you can read on the slide text, that is dedicated to humanitarian and pastoral support in, again, I repeat, the 15 countries where we work. And I think that's important as we begin to move through and become more and more familiar, as I hope you will, with the mission of Kenewa. The graphic here, the text on this slide identifies the regions in the world where we work and the kind of work that we do. Nelson. No, that's not the third slide. No, we have to go, that's it. So what you see there on this map, indicated by the red, where you see red there, those are the countries where we have offices. So Kenewa has offices in, first, before we get to the map, New York and Ottawa, but then on the map that you're looking at, Kenewa has offices in the Middle East. Our offices are in Jerusalem, in Amman, and in Beirut. The office in Beirut has responsibility for Egypt, parts of Iraq, Syria, and of course, Lebanon. In addition, we have offices in Ethiopia and in Eritrea. And I ask for your prayers in a very special way. The information that is coming in the last 24, 36 hours is that the situation in Ethiopia, particularly in the northern region, continues to escalate in terms of the violence that is there. And that is certainly something that in my Wednesday reports, I will come back to, because I do think that you'd like to know about it. You also see that we have an office in India. The office in India is one of our, is located in Ernakulam. And then in addition, we have partnerships where we work in Georgia and Armenia. And of course, the subject that we'll be coming to shortly for tonight, and that is in Ukraine. Next slide, thank you. On the slide that you're looking at now, I think it's just, again, a good overview for everyone who is tuned in tonight with regard to the way in which we work. And what's most important here is for us to understand and to appreciate Kenewa never operates in isolation. Our work is a work with the local church, beginning with the papal nuncios, beginning with the local bishops and eparchs. Again, it should be noted that the work of Catholic Near East, and that's very important, in the 15 countries where we are working is a mandate, a gospel mandate to serve the Eastern Catholic churches, to serve the Eastern Catholic churches. And we'll be seeing that more and more as we go through these Wednesday reports. But it's important for us to note that our specific mission is to work for Eastern Catholic churches. Next month, I'll be going to the annual meeting that I attend, actually moderating it in Rome, where we will be speaking with the other Catholic aid agencies, trying to address the issues that are being faced by the Eastern Catholic churches. We don't work in isolation. In each country where we work, in each country where we have a partnership, we are always working with the local priests and the women religious and the men religious who are involved in the various programs, and with particular attention to the women and men that make up the lay leadership in those countries where we find ourselves. So we start in terms of the overview of Kenewa's work by looking to the work that we do in India. And here in India, the slide that we're looking at and that we'll be looking at over these next few slides are really efforts to show Kenewa's involvement on a humanitarian level, where it involves bringing food to those who are in such desperate need to be fed. It is a fundamental gospel mandate to feed the poor, to give drink to the thirsty. It's taken right from Jesus in the Mount of Beatitudes. And we work so often with the leading role of the religious women who are in all of the countries where we work, connected with the work that we do in each of our offices. And so we begin here by looking to a sister as taking her in the leadership role that she has with her congregation in terms of feeding those who are poor, giving drink to those who are thirsty. In this next slide, we move from India to Lebanon. And once again, we see the ways in which Kenewa is at work trying to help the local church. As you all know, Lebanon, again, I ask you to keep people of Lebanon also in your prayers. They are undergoing very difficult times on multiple levels. I think you're familiar with most of them, so I won't repeat them all for right now, but I'll mention two. On May 15th, Lebanon will be having a very important general election. This will be of critical importance as Lebanon goes forward through this crisis. second area of crisis that Lebanon will be experiencing over the next couple of months will be the crisis that is the result of the war in Ukraine. And that is going to heighten what is already a very difficult situation in Lebanon. So the war in Ukraine and us taking a look at these other slides is of extreme relevance. It is not isolated, as horrible as it is, to what is being experienced in Ukraine and what is being experienced by the Ukrainian refugees. But we're introducing and trying to share these other slides because there is no part of the world where Kenewa is working that is not impacted by the war in Ukraine. In the slide that you're looking at now, it is one of the places where Kenewa works with partners. Kenewa works with partners in Eastern Europe. Here, the slide is taken from the country of Georgia. We have been involved in working with Georgia and with Caritas Georgia and Caritas Armenia for a number of years. It is the slide that you are viewing here. Again, these slides are going to bring us through the different countries. Again, I return to the situation in India. One of the great challenges that we have in India, of course, is with a series of legislation on the part of the Indian government going back to September of 2021, where they have initiated legislation that really makes it difficult and restricts foreign donations that are going in to serve the starving poor and those who are in need of food, medical assistance, and other forms of assistance that Kenewa and other charitable agencies give. We are remaining in compliance with what is becoming a more and more challenging situation in India. And we are very grateful for the leadership role, again, that is being taken by the women religious with regard to the way in which they are constantly there on the street. One of the great things about Kenewa that I have come to learn in my just 2 years and learned from the members of my executive committee here is that with Kenewa's offices, we are on the ground. We don't just come in, address an issue and leave. Kenewa is there. And it means for us, the challenge, the blessing is we're there to be with the people. The challenge is that what we need to do to fund and to keep alive our offices is a great one. Here we return to the situation in Ethiopia. And I really desperately tonight ask for your prayers. The situation as we speak is growing by the hour worse and worse. That is to say, more and more challenge because of more and more violence, more and more indications of starvation, and more people now who are fleeing, if they can, get out of the Tigray region and other parts of Ethiopia and going into neighboring countries. And this here was a visit which I made with our director of communication, Michael Lasavita. It was last Thanksgiving here in the US when we traveled to Beirut and to Iraqi Kurdistan. Here we are in Iraqi Kurdistan, and again, where we work with the women religious, the men religious, the different religious orders, in terms of trying to respond in those places. Many of these children that you're looking at are here in this place that has been provided for them by the religious women that we visited, but they had been sent from their homes, driven from their homes by the attacks of ISIS. I think we're all familiar with the ISIS story, certainly the violence, the sacrilege that took place in the places where ISIS attacked, particularly in Iraqi Kurdistan, and the efforts they made to disengage not only Christian villages, but the villages of other faiths in particular. So we're at work there, and it's another example where we are working here with the religious community in this particular slide. These slides continue again in terms of a slight movement from the humanitarian emphasis that you found in the earlier slides to now the emphasis that you're going to see where Kenewa is at work in education and in pastoral work. Here, Sister is involved, of course, in catechesis, and these slides that we're looking at here are an attempt now to see and appreciate the need that Kenewa has to continue to fund the work that we do in these particular places. That includes in this slide here, where Kenewa is at work, if you will, on an educative or on a pastoral level with regard to our work, again, in Ethiopia. One final slide here that shows Kinewa at work in terms of our role in education and pastoral service, particularly in Lebanon. And so in this particular, the role that Kinewa has played in Lebanon is extremely important. Education is extremely important in Lebanon. And so we are very grateful to you, the donors, who enable us to be present in Lebanon and to continue to do our work there, along with our office, which on the ground is able to assist with the various requests that we get, both in terms of the Catholic schools that we support, and we'll be seeing them shortly in terms of the healthcare that we are involved in. This here is an example now of Kinewa involved in healthcare, specifically in Iraqi Kurdistan, going back to the visit that we made back in November and the support that we're trying to give there to healthcare and to hospitals in Iraqi Kurdistan, and again, in all of the countries where we are at work. And again, in this slide here, and actually in the next slide, we're looking at Kinewa's work with regard to healthcare, both in Ethiopia and again in Iraqi Kurdistan. And these two final slides again show Kinewa at work in terms of both the humanitarian work that we're doing, as well as the work that we're trying to do specifically with regard to healthcare and to the care of the elderly. In many of the places where we work, we're working with the youth, as you can see here, and we're working with the elderly, as you can see here. So the work of Kinewa in the 15 countries where we're working is really to leave no segment of the population uncared for. It is a great theme that has come through in the work that we're doing, and certainly came through in the trip that we took, and it'll be seen now in a few moments, to the area of the bordering countries of Ukraine and into Ukraine itself. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Okay, Nelson. Okay. This slide, could you go back to the one that we just did? Okay. This slide here, I think, is important for us to talk about. These are seminarians in Ukraine, not the seminarians that you would see today in Ukraine because of the situation that exists. But it is worthwhile for us to spend a moment and just to see and to reflect that programs of formation, which involve Kinewa and Pontifical Mission in the various countries where we are at work, are also going to see the joy and the moment, the kinds of moments that are captured in this particular slide. It's one of the reasons why I asked our creative team to include this slide, because it gives us a sense of not only where we have been, but perhaps more importantly, our direction, the hope that we are holding out for the people of Ukraine. Okay, Nelson. Okay. Again, an example of where Kinewa is involved in terms of not only formation that is involved here, but the leadership that comes with formation. Because in the instance here of where we have clergy being formed, clergy are being formed, clergy that is for priests, and clergy that also refers to the women religious. And we are involved in supporting both as they move toward their lives of service. A note should be made, since we are in the service of the Eastern Catholic churches, that when Kinewa is involved not only in formation, but in support of Eastern Catholic priests, bear in mind that it is the tradition in the Eastern Catholic churches that young men in seminary have the option to date and to marry. And so therefore our support is for a priest, which means for him and his family, if he is one of those who during the years of his seminary chose to get married. And so this also becomes a way in which Kinewa is involved in the formation and in giving the support for those priests who then will go out and will be in the service of the entire communities. I think we have one final slide that we're going to show here. Yes, with Kinewa, again, with religious women involved in healthcare. So we'll bring it to a pause here, but I thought that it would be important just for you to be able to see and come to an appreciation of an overview, because there are so many that have joined us here tonight, and I'm so grateful for your presence here tonight. I thought it would be important for us to just give this overview in terms of the work, the mission of Kinewa in the 15 countries where we are at work and where we are at work in the service in particular of Eastern Catholic churches. One final note that I'll make, whether it's in the 15 countries where we are working, or as we're going to be looking at now with regard to the slides, yes, we are a papal agency. Yes, we work from a gospel mandate, but our work is for people of all faiths. We don't pause when we come to someone who is in need of some kind of support, whether that be food or drink or healthcare or whatever the support is. We are at work as a papal agencies, basically in countries that most often are not Christian countries. The one that has the highest populations of Christian population, of course, are going to be in Ukraine and the countries of Eastern Europe and in Lebanon. But the overwhelming work that we do is in countries where the population is not Christian and where, in many cases, the Christian population is declining. With that, we turn to Kanewa and Ukraine. From late January, as tension grew in Ukraine, one of the things that I tried to articulate through our blog and in the formats that we have available was a threefold priority for those who would join us with Kanewa and Pontifical Mission in Ukraine. Number one, and this can never be minimized, solidarity in prayer. The collapse of the Soviet Union, as you all know, did not come by virtue of arms. It came by virtue of many other factors, not the least of which was faith and prayer. Think, for example, of the role and the contribution that was made by the late Pope, St. John Paul II, with regard to the collapse of the old Soviet Union. Solidarity in prayer cannot be minimized. Second, the dissemination of correct and truthful information. I would invite you here to come to the Kanewa website, to come to the great and really award-winning magazine, One, which under the direction of our Director of Communications, Michael Lasavita, has been recognized on a national and international level for the kind of journalism that is involved there. I ask you to perhaps, when you have the time and want to know about the issues and the places where we're working, to come to our magazine One and to see there and see that as a source of education. We certainly do, and we're very proud of the fact that we can work towards correct and truthful information, particularly now with regard to Ukraine. And then, of course, the third priority that we have for someone who has been in prayer, for someone who has been informed, to pray to God, to ask what it is that God is asking you to do, as God is asking this agency to do, to give support for those who are suffering, both in Ukraine, that is the internally displaced people, and in the bordering countries. Those are the Ukrainian refugees. Hey. I'm sure all of us have been inundated because of our interest in the plight of the poor Ukrainian people. And I mean poor only in the sense of because of the devastation, the suffering that has been inflicted on them and on their sovereignty as a state. But with all of the images that I'm sure that we have all seen, this, I will say, is a unique image, because this image that you're looking at gives you an idea as to where Kanewa and Pontifical Mission are at work in Ukraine. So I just ask that we pause here for a moment. You can see the legend, which is under the map, and you'll get a sense there in terms of where Kanewa has been and continues to be involved in Ukraine. I think the map does a good job at showing that. I think we are familiar as we move from the west to the east of the city of Lviv and the work that Kanewa has done and continues to do at the Ukrainian Greek Catholic University, just to name one. The work of Kanewa in Lviv at the Sheptytsky Hospital, where we are involved in caring for wounded Ukrainian soldiers who are brought to that hospital. The work that Ukraine has done and continues to do in Kyiv, there again, in communion always, in communion with the major metropolitan Archbishop of Kyiv, who has throughout the war kept and developed the basement of his cathedral as his bunker. It's from that bunker site that the major metropolitan has released any number of public statements to inform the public as to what is happening and to invite the public to pray. And as we move more towards the east and towards the south, again, I think we're all quite familiar with the destruction that the Russian Federation has inflicted upon the people of Ukraine in those places. It was part of our experience in part due to the fact that for a time, Kenewa was involved even in supplying the soup kitchen in Mariupol. And when we traveled both to the border countries and when we traveled to Lviv, we'll see some of the images in a few moments, we were able to meet with some of those who fled from Mariupol. Come to those slides in a moment. But I think right now, I think it's just important for us to get a sense of the work of Kenewa in Ukraine. Let me add, Ukraine is not one of the countries where we have an office. Our work in Ukraine is through the multiple partnerships that we have developed over years. And we'll come to see some of those as we go through the remaining slides. Okay, Nelson. As I mentioned, when we organized the trip that Cardinal Dolan led, Cardinal Dolan wanted to make sure he, as the chair of the Board of Trustees of Kenewa, wanted to make sure that we could stop where possible in those places where we would be able to work with and see who else was doing work during the experience right now that the people of Ukraine are going through. Here in this first image that you see, on the first day of our visit, we stopped in a parish which is receiving support from, in particular, aid to the church in need. And also on the first day of our visit, we stopped to see a place where the Malteser International Group and the Caritas groups were working. And so what we're going to be looking at as we travel through these slides will be the ways in which we made visits to where Caritas Poland was at work, where Caritas Slovakia was at work, where Caritas Ukraine was at work, where Malteser International was at work, and where the aid to the church in need was at work. Nelson? This continues here as we go through the slides. And again, you'll see even some of the logos on some of the packages that are being delivered. One of the things that we experienced as we went through our trip, which began in Poland, and from Poland we went to Slovakia, then back to Poland and over to Ukraine, was that, and I'm sure you've heard this in the research or in the work that you've done, the exposure that you've had to what has been going on in Ukraine, there are no refugee camps in Poland. There are no refugee camps in Slovakia. Why? Because even though millions of people have left Ukraine to go into all the bordering countries, Poland, Hungary, Slovakia, Romania, Moldova, these countries who have received these refugees have received them into their homes, into their parishes, into church centers that are set up in railway stations. This is an extraordinary living out of the meaning of the gospel, to receive the neighbor, an extraordinary living out of what it means to give food to the hungry and to give drink to the thirsty, to clothe the naked, to give medicine to those who are suffering. Nelson? And this continues, as you can see here, going through our travel and with the groups that we continue to meet in the visits that we made. We're still here, we're traveling through the Poland portion of the pilgrimage of the trip of the visit that we made. Nelson? Here we arrived at really the first parish. You see, of course, Cardinal Dolan there. Cardinal Dolan was very well received in each of the stops that we made. Here at this first parish, it was a parish that had received direct support from the group, the Aid to the Church in Need. And the parishioners all came out. You see here the way in which we gathered together with parishioners, along with the parish priest. You also, as you're looking at the picture, for those of you who are from the Archdiocese of New York, as you're looking at the picture to the left, you will also see the newest of the bishops in the Archdiocese of New York, Archbishop John Bonici. Archbishop John Bonici sits on the board of directors of the Aid to the Church in Need in the United States. And it was a great privilege for us, Kanewa, to be in our organization of the trip under the direction of Cardinal Dolan to have Bishop Bonici with us. And certainly his comments were very well received as we went from location to location. If you also look, as you're looking again as with Cardinal Dolan as a point of reference and look slightly to the right, you'll see the man who is there, who is Monsignor Kevin Sullivan. Monsignor Kevin Sullivan is also a priest of the Archdiocese of New York, who is the director of Archdiocesan Catholic Charities. So it was really great for Kanewa as we went from place to place to show our openness, to show our desire to form partnerships and greater connectivity with others, to be able to have representatives from groups like Aid to the Church in Need, Bishop Bonici, and Monsignor Sullivan, along with, of course, Cardinal Dolan, who is the chair of Kanewa itself and our board of trustees. Here again, we see the work when we came to our second stop, really, on the first day. At this point, we were arriving at the railway station in Krakow. This is where we are now. And those who are greeting Cardinal Dolan, and behind him would have been the rest of the delegation, those who are greeting His Eminence are the members of the Malteser International. So in terms of Catholic agencies, once again, the Order of Malta, which dates back to the period of the Crusades and continues to function as an outstanding humanitarian group. And a humanitarian group, they also have done tremendous work in terms of education, and I could go on through the list. But here it was very important that the Cardinal and the rest of us from Kanewa wanted to be at the train stations. We made actually stops at 3 train stations because that's where we were able to greet Ukrainian refugees who were coming into this part, into the city of Krakow in Malta. And so we were very grateful for the work that was done and for our ability here also to be received by Malteser International and by the great work that's being done by the Order of Malta. As you see here, we have entered the train station. And when we come into the train station, again, I'm going to keep using Cardinal Dolan as the point of reference because everybody knows Cardinal Dolan. And no matter where we went, there was no necessity to introduce Cardinal Dolan because he was recognized as soon as he walked into whatever space we walked into. So with Cardinal Dolan as the point of reference, to the left there, you see Bishop Bonici. For those of you from the Archdiocese of New York, again, Bishop Bonici's presence, the comments that he made as we went from place to place were always so well received. The person that you see standing in the front of Cardinal Dolan, you do see the microphone. The person that you see standing in the front of Cardinal Dolan is the reporter from ABC News. Both ABC News and NBC News sent reporters and camera people. So those are the people that you see as they welcome Cardinal Dolan, as they receive his comments here in the train station in Krakow. To the far right, wearing the red jacket, is where you see, again, some of the members of the Order of Malta, and in particular, Malteser International. Malteser International, right here within the train station, has set up a medical unit. So as people were making their way from Ukraine and getting here to Krakow, one of the things that they could experience in terms of the gospel welcome would have been, for example, here, Malteser International, with their willingness and their desire to offer any kind of assistance that was needed. Nelson. And here, not a great distance from the train station, but certainly, again, part of the work that is done by Caritas in the Archdiocese of Krakow was a center that was set up for refugees, those who would be arriving from the trains and who were in immediate need if they needed medical supplies, if they needed perhaps they needed clothing, perhaps they needed to be fed, they needed to be in whatever documentation, they needed help with regard to that. Again, all those who we went to see were the refugees now who have come from Ukraine. Let me pause here. For everything that you are seeing, it's thanks to you that what they experienced, whether they received medicine, clean water, food, medical treatment, or the possibility of at least a temporary now getting settled into Krakow, they were able to receive that out of the generosity of those of you who are on this call and watching these slides. That's how these things got there. Whether it was Aid to the Church in Need, Malteser International, the Knights of Columbus, or of course, Kenewa. The trip was about Kenewa. Kenewa organized the trip, but for all those others that we met, all those partnerships that we formed and continue to form, they can happen thanks and because of you. Thank you. Nelson? Now, here after the first night in Krakow, we then left Poland to go into Slovakia. And we went into Slovakia, we went to the city of Košice. We went to the city of Košice because, as I said, and that's why it was so important at the beginning of the presentation, to identify the work, the mission, the mandate of Kenewa with the Eastern churches. So by going to Košice, which is a city not far from the Ukrainian border, we went here and were received here by the Eastern Eparch of Košice, and here by one of the leading priests of his cabinet, who received us, the Eparch himself, who was always most gracious and is known to Kenewa, has worked with Kenewa. When he had been in Rome in the congregation of the Eastern churches, he was in Rome at the time of our visit. But again, you see here how he sent an entire delegation to receive us here, to bring us right into the pastoral center. So he receives here Cardinal Dolan, and you can see in the background again, Bishop Bonici and the others of our team, along with the members of the team from Košice, from the pastoral center in Košice. Archbishop Cyril Vasil is the one who is the archbishop here. I should state, just for the record, because again, it's a matter of the way in which Košice works, that the Metropolitan See for the Eastern Catholics is not in Košice, it's in Prešov. We did not have the time to include both Prešov and Košice on our itinerary, so we went here to Košice, and what you're going to be looking at in the next couple of slides, certainly the next 2 slides, will be our visit to Košice. Nelson? Shortly after the time that we spent in the pastoral center, we went here to the church in Košice, which is the church, the cathedral church for the archbishop, where he presides. Since the archbishop himself could not be present, he designated one of the priests assigned to the cathedral to lead us in a prayer service. And again, the prayer services that we held while we worked with the Eastern Catholic churches, these were prayer services that were specifically labeled, identified as ecumenical prayer services. Meaning what? Meaning that while Eastern Catholics could be present, so also Orthodox Christians were welcome to be present, or anybody that the local church wanted to invite to the prayer service, because the people who are suffering are people who are suffering, while yes, Ukraine is overwhelmingly Christian, Orthodox Christian, and then Catholic Christian with both Latin, not many Latin Catholics, but somewhere in the area of between 8.1 and maybe 8.5% who would be Eastern Catholics. That's the mission, that is the direct link for Kenewa and Pontifical Mission. So that's where this is being held, in an Eastern Catholic church. For many of you who maybe are Latin Catholics, you can see that what you're looking at there in terms of the entrance into the sanctuary is different from the entrance into our sanctuaries. And that might be a topic that we'll explore on some of these Wednesday reports of the president to the donors, because it is very different. The iconostasis that you're looking at and that that the priest walks through is meant to show the way in which the understanding is cultivated in terms of the holiness of God, but the holiness of God that comes to us, particularly in the mystery of the incarnation. Listen. Okay. In these 2 slides that you're going to look at now, this one here and the next one, these were perhaps, for many of the people who were present, 2 of the most dramatically moving moments of our trip. What are you looking at? The slides that you're looking at here and the next one are slides which show mothers with their children who were invited to speak at this moment and in this prayer service. Could you just go back, Nelson, to the first one? No. Yeah. So this one and the one that you just saw, the woman that was being given consolation by Cardinal Dolan. They came to us, and in the context of the prayer service, they shared their stories, the parts of Ukraine from which they fled. How, as they fled as a family, starting as a family, as I'm sure many of you know, when you deal with young families like this, as you come to the border, even long before you get to the border, the men are stopped because the men are not permitted to leave Ukraine. They are to remain in Ukraine where they're given arms to defend the country. The mothers and the children are given permission to leave. So here they are telling their story of their flight. They're telling the story of their husbands, of their brothers. They're telling the story of now what the sacrifices they must make because of the ways in which they have been treated during the course of their flight. And here in Košice and in other places, what needs to be done? Well, what we found was that most Ukrainians that we encountered in these countries and the ones that we encountered in Ukraine had no intention to stay out of Ukraine for any time longer than what was required for their safe re-entry into Ukraine. What does that mean? That means for the local church here, it was a matter of now trying to provide for the children some type of at least temporary schooling. And so in the diocese, in the eparchy of Košice, the request was made of Kenewa to see what we might be able to do to help in terms of supplying the kinds of means that they could use to at least construct temporary schools. And for the mothers, the diocese of the eparchy of Košice is going to be involved now in either the documentation that's necessary or begin to put together job resumes for work for the time that they have to be here until once again they can be reunited with their family. And reunited doesn't mean waiting for their husbands and brothers and uncles to come out of Ukraine. It means only one thing: their return to Ukraine. That's what this is about. Next slide, Nelson. I think this captures it. No, Nelson, yeah, thank you. So in this slide here, the Cardinal himself was also very deeply moved by listening as we listened to the translation and interpretation of the stories. There were several people in our delegation who had to excuse themselves for the remainder of the day because of how powerfully touched, how powerfully moved they were by the stories that we listened to. One of the things that Kenewa has been involved in, this touches not only on the story here with Ukraine, but also touches on the story and the crisis that is unfolding in other places. I'll mention two: Beirut, and then also, of course, in the area of Ethiopia and Tigray, is the need, and I've become much more aware of it, and I know the great executive team that I work with here, they're also aware of it. We need to provide more funds for psychosocial counseling. These people have lived through trauma, whether it's here in Ukraine or in Lebanon. They have lived through trauma. Not they have lived in the past tense. They are living through trauma. Trauma has been there for all of them, and for many, lack of trust in institutions has been their experience. Nelson? So here we move on to our next visit. We return here we've left Slovakia now, and we come to Poland. Now, when we come here to Poland, I would ask you, as you're looking at this slide, you see the bishop that I'm shaking hands with. This particular bishop is a bishop who represents in the diocese of Przemyśl in Poland. This is the Latin bishop. So you see him, and you see behind him Bishop Bonici. You see over this bishop's left shoulder, Cardinal Dolan. We are here at the train station, second train station, at the train station at Przemyśl, where the Latin bishop was able to meet us. And now the next slide, Nelson. And where, as you're looking here at Cardinal Dolan, if you look just beyond his extended right arm and hand, you see another bishop. That's the Eastern bishop of the same town of Przemyśl, Bishop Eugene Popovich. And then, of course, beyond him, Bishop Bonici. Bishop Bonici was a great presence throughout the trip, as was Cardinal Dolan. Here, so Cardinal Dolan, Bishop Bonici, myself, the rest of the delegation, we have been received here at this second train station by both the Latin Archbishop and by the Greek Catholic Archbishop, both as Catholic as the other, but representing the Latin Catholics and the Greek Catholics. Now, we moved from the train station, again in the same town of Przemyśl, which is close to the border of Ukraine. What you're seeing here, the two gentlemen that are looking at us in the slide, the man to the right, we have now come to visit the Council of Ukraine, the General Council of Ukraine in Przemyśl. So that's the gentleman who's looking at us from the right. The gentleman who's looking at us on the left is the Greek Archbishop of Przemyśl. And the person that you see who with the hand extended that's Cardinal Dolan's hand as we're in conversation. Here, the big concern in Przemyśl, which is not far from the Ukrainian border, is what can be done? What are we doing now to help those people who are settling here? And of course, tremendous amount is being done here by the local Polish, in concert with the Ukrainian General Consulate to help for the people who are coming here to at least settle for the time that they're going to be there. Settle in terms of finding some work, settle in terms of papers they need, and eventually help them in terms of their return to Ukraine. Nelson? Here we move now into Ukraine. We moved into Ukraine. We went to the city of Lviv. You're all familiar with the city of Lviv. You've seen that any number of times. All of the major networks are stationed basically in Lviv and many of them report out of Lviv. They report out of other places too, but I think we're all familiar with the important city of Lviv. Here we have come to the seminary in Lviv. And as you're looking at that front line, going from right to left, you see Bishop Bonici. Well, first you see Monsignor Kevin Sullivan, and then to the left, then moving right to left, Bishop Bonici, who is also the pastor of the parish of Saints John and Paul in Larchmont. And then, of course, himself, Cardinal Dolan. And next to Cardinal Dolan, this is the Latin Archbishop of Lviv, the Latin Archbishop of Lviv. And next to the Latin Archbishop of Lviv, you have the individual who is responsible for the Knights of Columbus in Lviv and in Ukraine. Very important for our visit. All those who are behind, those who I've named, represent either faculty or seminarians at the seminary where we were here in Lviv. This visit to the seminary was a very powerful one, not only here to be able to try to give support, show support to the seminarians who are there, show support and our collaboration with the Knights of Columbus. Standing just before us, it's not in the picture, was a truck. This truck, which would, by terms that we would be familiar with, would look like just a huge moving van. This really had become a mobile supply unit furnished by the Knights of Columbus, where they would try to move supplies where roads permitted and where safety permitted into different parts of Ukraine to be able to distribute what? To be able to distribute clean water. Why clean water? Because the Russians, with their invasion, were also poisoning the rivers. So onto the truck, those who would donate clean water. They would donate medicine. They would donate food. They would donate the clothing that was needed, et cetera, et cetera. So that is the work that was being done. But the truck, the supply station, was being housed here at the seminary. So to see the supply truck, to support the seminarians, and then if you look beyond the doors that you see there with those seminarians, we went up into the seminary. I had the privilege of going with Cardinal Dolan into one of the rooms there where we again met a number of the Ukrainian, now we're not talking about refugees. We're talking about refugees when they leave Ukraine to go to the neighboring countries. When we were visiting Ukrainians who were in very difficult situations here. We're talking about internally displaced people, internally displaced people. Perhaps some of you saw the images of the young man, maybe in his late 20s, who is sitting, and he is sitting on the floor in front of his cot. On the opposite side of the cot is his mother. This man whom we saw and who was introduced, well, we were told who he was, has not spoken a single word since his village and his home were bombed. It is like it was the closest thing to seeing someone in a state of catonic shock. He has not spoken a word, and his mother sits with him throughout the day, every day, hoping that for him to see her in some way or become more familiar with those who are trying to bring help will bring him to the point that he will be able to utter his first word. Pray for that boy. Pray for his mother. Pray for those from Ukraine who, as we walked from one room to the next, had other conditions that they were dealing with because they had been forced out of their homes since the invasion of February 24th. Here in this slide, we move to, again, one of the other parishes where, once again, in the experience, we are still here in Ukraine, but again, it was one of the parishes where the local parish priests and the religious women are doing all that they can to keep their parish together. In this particular section, being in the western part of Ukraine where it is and where we were with them, it is a place where for sure they are concerned and trying to do what they can do, either by receiving Ukrainians from the east and the south, or by trying to put together, in effect, their own supply station to be able to get goods and bring it to the east and to the south. Nelson. Another one of the most powerful locations that we visited, this again in the city of Lviv. One of the individuals that perhaps many of you are familiar with and who was so helpful to me and helpful to us here at Kenewa is Archbishop Boris Gudziak. Archbishop Boris Gudziak he serves currently as the Archeparch of the Archeparchy of Philadelphia. But before coming to that position, Archbishop Gudziak was very, very much involved in the slide that you're looking at here. That is, in the development of the current Catholic University of Ukraine in Lviv, and in particular with regard there to several of the faculties. But so much of his life, Archbishop Gudziak, has been involved here at this campus. And he strongly encouraged, and he's a good friend of His Eminence Cardinal Dolan, and encouraged Cardinal Dolan, encouraged me as we were putting the trip together to do all that we could to make an effort to get to this campus. And we did. And Cardinal Dolan, thanks to Cardinal Dolan, thanks to the leadership of Cardinal Dolan, and thanks here to what you're seeing, Cardinal Dolan has his right arm and hand extended over the Archbishop, the Latin Archbishop of Lviv, and his left arm and hand over the rector of the university. The lady that you see who is speaking to them is one of the vice rectors of the university, very articulate in presenting to us what is the condition now of the university and what is being done, both in terms of trying to keep some semblance of university life open while this is going on, and the university itself. And she was very clear in communicating to us and in leading us to the different places in the university where we were able to meet a number of the internally displaced persons from parts east and south in Ukraine who came to the university. They didn't come because of us. They came thanks to what is being done at the university where they're being given housing. Nelson. And here again, as she brings us through the campus, she's explaining to us yet just another site along the way in terms of what we saw. Her presentation was outstanding. And you see again, Bishop Bonici there and Cardinal Dolan with the Latin Archbishop and with the rector of the university. Nelson. I mentioned we're still here at the campus of the university. One of the student groups had asked Cardinal Dolan for an interview. Cardinal Dolan, throughout the trip, was most gracious. I never saw him turn down any individual or any group who wanted to have a moment of time with him. And so here, the individual young man that you see who was with Cardinal Dolan wanted to just express gratitude of the student group to His Eminence for the trip that he, as the chair of the Board of Trustees of Catholic Near East and Pontifical Mission, led. And here was an opportunity for an interview to take place really with a local Ukrainian group. So in addition to the interviews that the Cardinal gave to Channel 7, Channel 4, his own video team that accompanied us throughout the entire trip, and they were great. In addition to that, wherever he was requested, here it's a Ukrainian group, in addition to his own team, and then also he had received several requests when we got back into Poland by Polish groups to also be able to give an interview. Okay. And I know that my time is running out, so could Nelson? So here, once we had left Ukraine, we literally crossed the border. As we crossed the border, the tent that you're looking at here, this is in the town of Rybenne. As soon as we cross the border, the first thing that people see, the very first thing, is this tent. This is a mercy center that comes under the joint collaboration of Catholic Near East Welfare Association and Pontifical Mission and the Knights of Columbus. This is our joint collaboration, this tent here. You see Cardinal Dolan as he's explaining it to the reporter from ABC News. And you see, as you're looking through the entrance to the tent, both the coat of arms of the Knights of Columbus and the coat of arms of the Catholic Near East Welfare Association and Pontifical Mission. As people would come up, people who were fleeing Ukraine were coming across the border. As they entered the tent, what do they receive? As they enter their tent, first and foremost, they receive human attention, human welcome, human reception. They also receive whatever they need in terms of medicine. They receive whatever they need in terms of clean water, which perhaps had been deprived if they had only access to waters that had been poisoned by the Russian invasion. They receive basic food. They receive at least some initial documentation. And as soon as you enter the door that you're looking at, immediately to the right, there was a chapel. Nelson? Here, Cardinal Dolan is giving really a very hearty welcome and thanks to the sisters, to the religious women who we had met. Actually, these religious women are at the shrine of Sister Faustina. I'm sure that you are all familiar with the Shrine of Mercy of Sister Faustina, with the legacy of divine mercy. I said we made a stop there on the first day that we arrived, just as a devotional stop and as a moment of prayer. We need prayer. We need lots of prayer. And so the gracious sisters of Divine Mercy Shrine traveled from the shrine in Poland to come here to the Rybenne Mercy Center under the care of the Knights of Columbus and Catholic Near East Welfare Association. They came here to greet us, and Cardinal Dolan, of course, made a point of greeting them. Nelson? And here, as I said, as soon as you walk inside the tent of the Mercy Center with all that is provided, here Cardinal Dolan thought it appropriate to offer Mass for the care workers. And also, you can't see them right on this slide, but if you were to look to the left side of the slide where you see those coffee pots, you could also see on the other side of the table some of the refugees who had also joined us. And you can see on the inside of the tent there, on the upper left-hand side, the Kanewa logo, as well, along with that of the Knights of Columbus. Again, collaboration. This was the theme for this trip, organized under the auspices of His Eminence, organized by Catholic Near East Welfare Association and Pontifical Mission, but where we are constantly trying to move to make wider and larger the network of partnerships that we're working with. Nelson? Again, here is just a brief little clip that shows you the inside of the pantry that is within this Mercy Center. Again, what we're trying to do, when I say us, I'm referring to Kanewa and Knights of Columbus, what we're trying to do here is to provide all those immediate things that refugees who are fleeing to get out of Ukraine to get some relief would need before they go back. This is an interview that I gave. I gave 2 interviews at this tent. One was to the Knights of Columbus team and one was to EWTN team. Nelson. And the final slide. So here we arrived at the second, this is us in Warsaw. We arrived here at a parish in Warsaw, which is the second Mercy Center, sponsored by Kanewa, there you see us, and the Knights of Columbus. And here, the Cardinal and I were able to just highlight this for a moment in terms of being one other way. And I know if the Cardinal were here making the presentation, he would be singing your praises for your generosity and expressing his gratitude to all of you. And I do that in his name, and I do that in my name and in the name of everybody who works here at Kanewa. Thank you very much. Thank you for taking the time. I know I went a little longer than I expected. If anybody is still on the call, I'll take any questions or anything that might come out of the chat room. Thank you all very much for your support for Kanewa. Is there any questions? Now, I know that Noel Siglisi, our Director of Development, is here, and so is Hinda. If there are questions, if we go back to the front one, the first one. Very first. I just want to make sure if there are any questions, I answer. All right, welcome back home. Okay. Well, I'm glad that you can see Heimdall and myself, but that's not what was important. Is that a question?
No, there's no question.
Hi from Houston. Hello, Houston. I feel like an astronaut. Was that?
Stefano, Connecticut. No questions.
Well, I'm glad that everybody could see the slides. That's the most important thing. Would you say, what is that? Would you say typical? What is it?
Senior with the engagement model after work is to partner with existing local religious.
Yes, we do. Kanewa does that in every location, in each of the 15 countries where we are working. Thank you for bringing that point up. That's what we try. It's always work with the local church. And here that means working with the local religious congregations. That goes across the board for Kanewa. Thank you for bringing that up.
Monsignor, Marcella Smith is asking, what most surprised you in your visit?
What most surprised me in my visit? I think I was very surprised, Marcella, and I just want to give recognition to Marcella Smith, who has been of enormous assistance in terms of these videos, these Zooms. She was involved in the collaboration for the last one, and will be involved in the collaboration for the next one that will be done with an artist. Hopefully, we're trying to link artists between New York and Ukraine. So Marcella, with regard to surprise for the visit, and no, thank you very much for bringing it up. I was surprised being on the scene by the enormity of the suffering and what the Ukrainian people have been through and are going through, and what this has meant. The destruction of life, the destruction of property. But let me add to that, and I mean this very sincerely, what the Russian Federation has done through this horrific invasion has also, and this was maybe not a surprise, but certainly something to note, has so embedded the virtue of hope, faith, resilience on the part of the Ukrainian people, that was something that I hope that I can take away and learn from them. Their suffering has been enormous, but the resolve, the hope that they bring was as enormous, if not greater. The Russian Federation in this invasion has united people in ways that perhaps even churches, even Christian and non-Christian groups have come together because of the horrific attack that has happened on the sovereign state and on the people of Ukraine.
Monsignor, you'd be happy to know we've gotten greetings from Lviv. Roman Zavitsky is thanking us for the work we've done. We also have a question from Francine Polovich. Are you working with Catholic Relief Services?
So what was the question?
Are you working with CRS?
Oh, yes. So please, I'm sorry. We are certainly working with CRS in that the final meeting that we had in Warsaw was a meeting that was really sponsored through CRS. And again, I thank Sean Callahan. I had spoken with Sean Callahan before the trip, and Sean Callahan did a great job in the organization of a CRS Caritas Poland presentation to our entire delegation of Catholic Near East Welfare Association. And it was, at least at this level, initially, it was a great exchange with regard to the way in which they shared with us all that they have done, what they are doing, extraordinary. And we were able to listen and also to share with them. I'll also just say one other thing, because I happened to be yesterday at a meeting with Sean Callahan because of the presence here in New York City of King Abdullah of Jordan. And so both Sean Callahan and I had been privileged to be invited to that meeting, a round table, a discussion with the king, and we were very grateful for that, but also it gave a chance for Sean and I just to catch up in terms of the great work that CRS is doing and the work that Kenewa is doing. And so it's just good to be in connection, partnership, communication with one another.
And Ms. Polovic has a follow-up question. What more can we do for the Ukrainian refugees?
What work can we do for the Ukrainian refugees?
What more can we do?
Oh, sorry, what more can we do for the Ukrainian refugees? There, again, I'll make one pitch for us and Kenewa. If you really are to go to kenewa.org, you will see there the promptings that were going to lead you to the whole situation of Ukraine at war. And you will have every opportunity. Number one, I'll come back to the three basic priorities that I've tried to articulate. Number one, pray. Pray. Say a special rosary on Friday to Our Lady of Fatima to pray for the Ukrainian people, number one. Number two, through the Kenewa blog, be informed, get accurate information as to what is going on. Number three, if you're moved through your prayer and information to offer some kind of a donation, well, certainly by going to kenewa.org, the promptings there will lead you to give whatever your means allow you to give. So those are the three priorities: pray, be informed, give. And we thank you. Are there anything else in the chat room? We're good.
Yep.
Okay, no, thank you so much. Imdad, thank you to the entire executive committee and all of you who are involved in a particular way this afternoon. Tim, to Michael Asavir, who took so many of those pictures. Noel, thank you very much, and your whole department for bringing it all together. Most importantly, I thank all of you who tuned in, all the participants who are involved. We're going to start these monthly reports on the part of the president to Kenewa. It's your generosity, and we want to be as transparent before you and accountable before you for where your donations are going. Thank you very much. God bless everybody. Please pray for Ukraine, pray for peace.
Thank you.